My name's Nat, and I work at Exceptional Individuals. We are a small social enterprise that supports individuals to not just understand their brains, but how to utilize their brains. We also support organizations to really harness neurodivergence. Today, I'm predominantly going to be looking at dyslexia, dyspraxia, autism, ADHD. They aren't all of the different ways of thinking, just a handful, but these are the most prevalent, the ones you're most likely to run into the wild. That's why we're going to be looking at them. I am neurodivergent, experts by experience, as they say. I've got dyslexia, dyspraxia, and autism. It does sound like I'm showing off, okay? I'm not. These are just the labels they started giving me. But really, it's because of neurology. My brain thinks differently, and honestly, they didn't really know what to call me, because you don't fit neatly into boxes. This is why if you have one condition, you probably have another. It's just how it goes. Labels are a construct created by professionals in order to give us a starting point for a conversation. They do not tell you the whole story. But I'm getting a little bit ahead of myself. Here's a picture of me on the BBC. I talk about the brain all the time, train thousands of people, and I even got myself a lovely master's in neuroscience. Got my certificate somewhere. You're in good hands. Here's our team. There's myself, but we're all neurodivergent, lived experience. If I am successful today, and I plan to be, we're going to understand a bit about what is inclusion. Hopefully you know this stuff. It's just a recap. We're going to be revisiting neurodiversity. If you're not really sure what it is, don't worry. I'll talk about it from basic level. We're going to do online training. What are some of the adjustments that you might want to make? What about in-person training? Maybe a little bit about slide design, and then a couple of tech adjustments that people who are neurodivergent may use, and just for you to understand why they may use them and if it's going to have any impact. I'm not sure how familiar you all are with lots of different models, but to break it down, you've got the medical model and the social model. These are just different ways of talking about disability. Disability is a little bit of a Debbie Downer of a term. It's talking about what you can't do. That's the medical model. The medical model is like a professional who looks at someone who's a little bit different and says, oh, you're different to me. I'm going to fix you. That isn't that progressive. However, that is the main term we use. When we use things like dyslexia, dyspraxia, autism, we're talking about the medical model. I'm not the biggest fan of this medical model. However, we can't throw the baby out with the bathwater. It's a term everyone uses. I'm going to be trying to focus a bit more on the social model today, which is saying, hey, I'm completely fine. Society screwed me over. They haven't developed things to work with me. Society's the barrier. These models together is how we understand people who think differently. I would argue that neurodivergence, how the brain processes, isn't a disability. But what I will say is that living in a world which isn't catered towards your mindset then creates a disabling effect. Each to their own. All people have different views on that. On this, I just want you to rank what you think are the top priorities when it comes to inclusion. All of them are important, but it's good to know why are we even bothering with this? Are we doing it because we should? Are we doing it because it actually has benefit? All of this will come under neuro-inclusion. This is including people who physically are different, who have different religions, who are different ages, who fancy different or same people, different genders. No matter what your background in, it all brings diversity of thought. If you're thinking today, it's predominantly going to be looking at things like dyslexia, dyspraxia, autism, you'd be right. But the bigger picture is making sure that no matter how your brain connects the dots, you're going to gain something from today. We've got value in diversity. Yeah. Equitable opportunities, continuous improvements, open communications, inclusive practices. Inclusive practices, for you, got the 5th position. Obviously, they're all great, but we are mainly doing this because we want to hear other viewpoints. When we say this is a man's world and it wasn't created for everyone in it, it's the same principle with neurodiversity. A particular type of processing this world was catered around, and that means we are stifling innovation. By opening up how we teach and approach matters, we will be able to get views from all different areas of the planet. Here's an open question. I've told you my view on why inclusion is important, but why is inclusive facilitation important in particular? As someone who struggled with education massively, this is something that I'm personally very passionate about. Without going into my whole backstory, I was a problem student. I was kicked out of school. I was told I couldn't study subjects like English literature. I love reading. I couldn't study science because they thought I wouldn't pass, so why bother? Bit depressing. Years later, I said, screw it. And I taught myself through YouTube and other methods, and I decided to study in my own time. Only when I got my master's in neuroscience the other day. It does show you that the education system, not just for children, but for adults, is a very much a one-size-fits-all, and we're potentially limiting those who want to learn from being able to learn effectively. That's my opinion anyway. So that everyone has equal learning experiences, therefore equal opportunities. Lovely stuff. Sense of belonging and recognition, which is key to self-determination. Confidence, resilience. Not doing so is unfair and also misses out on huge, useful viewpoints. You've got the moral perspective, and then you've got the legal perspective, and also you've got the business perspective. It makes business sense to be inclusive. It's also a legal requirement to be inclusive. And if you're a good person, you'd want to be inclusive to make sure we're enabling people to be their best, create a safe environment. I think we got this inclusion malarkey sorted. We can nicely move on now. This is just the different kind of things that we might want to consider when creating a good dynamic for facilitation. Regarding neurodiversity, what is it that you came here to learn today? Is there anything? It could be, I still don't really understand what it means. Or are there lots of different types of autism? How does that work? Maybe you want to know about yourself, how to resonate. How best to help neurodiverse people to learn without putting them under too much pressure or doing the wrong thing? I don't know if there's such a thing, to be honest, as right or wrong way, but I totally think you're right. The idea of putting people under unnecessary pressure. It's like when people say, Nat, can you read out loud or can you write on the board? My heart would sink. Then I would never want to put my hand up again, or I'd sit in the back. Negative experiences do have long-lasting consequences. How can neurodiversity affect participants when other people are not aware of their neurodiversity? Good question. We'll get onto this, but neurodiversity is everyone. Everyone thinks differently. We don't know how it affects them, how their brain works, but we know everyone experiences the world differently. We can use that as our starting point. How to be inclusive when people don't know or willing to share that they are. Most people are going to be aware. Typically, you get diagnosed with, say, dyslexia, dyspraxia, but they don't tell you anything more about it. The average person will not know they are neurodivergent, even if they know they have, say, dyslexia. Other thing, disclosure. I wouldn't put too much pressure on people to disclose. The history of thinking differently is brutal. We've had people drill into our brains. We've been euthanized. We've been told our parents are terrible. We've been like, oh, if you take vaccinations, it's because of that. History's been cruel. Even though that was a long time ago, ripples through history. Other things that are worth noting is that the Western perspective on neurodiversity is very different from an Eastern perspective. In some cultures, the word autism directly translates to madness, or in places like Korea, autism is seen as a genetic disease or something you want to get rid of. This is why people don't disclose, for many reasons. We know it's not, by the way. How to make neurodiverse delegates feel comfortable and have the same access to learning, also as a detailed challenge around eye contact. I would say we need to stop trying to make neurodivergent people conform to neurotypical ideas. Eye contact is something that we deem to be normal. Remember how I spoke about how different nationalities and different backgrounds have different views? Eye contact's a really interesting one. From a Western perspective, if you don't make eye contact with me, it's considered rude, it's not considered engaging, and you probably have autism. That's what people think. However, in Japan, not making eye contact as a child is considered polite. If you make eye contact, you are rude and disrespecting your elders. You wouldn't diagnose someone with autism in Japan because they're just following the status quo. You have to look at it from a cultural perspective, but also, why can't the person be their authentic self? Do they have to conform to what we deem as the best way of presenting yourself? Good way to create safe space, understanding areas important and learning how to make sure inclusive across all our training, communications, where are our blind spots. One thing I will say is you can't make a completely inclusive training. It's too broad. If you make a workshop which is particularly suited to someone who is autistic, you've made a session which is horrible for someone with dyslexia, because in many ways they contradict each other. It's not about making something perfect for one. It's about allowing something to be accessible for as many people as possible. You don't have to solve all my challenges. You just have to make it easy enough for me to use the challenges that I know work for me, I'm able to implement them. For example, I can absolutely read, but I can't read and comprehend at the same time. So I will highlight words and I'll typically get my speech software to read it back to me. That's all great. But if I'm working with something at the moment, okay, here I can. And then I'll be like,
understand different areas and the impact it can have.
There I can. But had I not have been able to do that, I wouldn't have been able to engage as actively as I would have liked. How to make neurodiverse delegates feel comfortable and have the same access to learning. How do we keep someone with ADHD engaged and they can deliver training? ADHD is a great one. A lot of people think ADHD is about a lack of attention. Yeah, wrong. ADHD isn't about having too much attention. Our brain is focused on everything, where most people will have a priority of that's more important. I'm going to focus on that. All this other junk I'm not going to think about. Those with ADHD take focus on everything. Because our brain loves this juicy little neurotransmitter, this chemical in our brain called dopamine, it will always look for low-hanging fruit. Low-hanging fruit are things that grabs its attention. And if it takes its focus to there, it'll get a flood of dopamine and the brain will be really like, that's where it's going to take its attention. While you still might have a similar challenge, we've got to be mindful that it's not about someone getting distracted because of lack of attention. If anything, there are other things within that environment which are more engaging than you. Are there any indicators that we should be aware of when people may not know? I'm not trying to create a witch hunt here because that's not a healthy way of going about it. The truth is, a lot of people are neurodivergent. It's not really worth categorizing them up. It's much better to say people are different. Let's just roll with that. How to make neurodiverse people feel included as a detailed question or an icon. Okay, cool. Now let's actually talk about what neurodiversity is. I reckon maybe a lot of you have a basic understanding. Do you know how to explain it to someone? Because the people you will be supporting probably won't be able to explain it themselves. It's not that difficult, really. Neuro, as in brain, our brain has lots of pathways, dots connecting to dots, and everyone's little wires are all different. Diversity, everyone's different. When we talk about neurodiversity, it's an umbrella term, and we are talking about every single person on the planet. Everyone who has a brain has a different way of processing. We're not discriminating here. Talking about neurodiversity is just talking about ways of thinking. There's more pinky brains than there are upper color brains. All brains are the same color, work with me here. The pink color brains are in the majority. They're not better. They're not worse. They just are in the majority. They are called A neurotypical brain is just that. It's typical to its surroundings. A neurotypical brain in England will be very different from a typical brain in China. It just means typical to the majority that are around you. That means your brain can function more or less with too much friction because things around you, systems, policies were created in mind. If you have a brain which thinks substantially different to the majority, not because it's worse or better, but just different to how most people process, you would be part of a group called neurodiverse. An individual, as in me, is not neurodiverse. Oh, Nat, you're so diverse. That's weird. Neurodiverse is talking about a collective, okay? A group of people who think differently are neurodiverse. If you had a group and the whole group was autistic, they wouldn't be neurodiverse. But if you had someone with dyslexia, dyspraxia, someone who just wasn't diagnosed and thought different, some neurotypical people, when we have that variation, that is when it's a neurodiverse group. If you are one person, however, and you think substantially different to the majority, that is when you'd be called neurodivergent. You could be neurodivergent and have dyslexia. You could be neurodivergent and have autism. You could be neurodivergent and not have a diagnosis whatsoever, but you just know that you think substantially different. People use these words interchangeably, neurodiverse, neurotypical, even I do sometimes, but they do have different meanings. Umbrella term includes everything. Neurotypical, just the average way of doing things. Neurodiverse, a collective amounts of different ways of thinking. Individual may or may not be diagnosed. If you ever want to know, am I neurodivergent? It's a good question. Whether you're not neurodivergent, this is how I explain it. It's called a spiky profile. It's a good way to know if someone is neurodivergent. Remember, you don't have to be neurodivergent and be diagnosed. They often go together. They don't have to. This line at the bottom is your natural skills. These are the skills you were born with. On the left is how easy or difficult you find it. The line in the middle that goes up and down is someone who is neurotypical. For instance, they might find reading okay. They might be all right at coming up with ideas, okay at public speaking, okay at processing, fine motor skill, emotional regulation, timekeeping, creativity. They'll be more or less okay. They are neurotypical because they do find things easy and difficult, but the amount of easy and difficult is within a certain remit, which most of our systems, policies, HR, everything in life is created to sit smoothly within. If you're neurodivergent, a lot of people think this is just a rebranding of disability. Oh, it means that you can't read, you can't communicate, you struggle with coordination. Not at all. If you are just bad at everything, you've got something else going on, but you're not neurodivergent. To be neurodivergent, you have to have that fluctuation of ability. You have to have skills that maybe you struggle with compared to the average, but you also have to have skills you absolutely thrive in. You've got to have a spiky profile. That, in essence, is neurodivergent. Disability is focusing on the bottom spikes. Neurodivergence is accepting someone for all that they are, the good, the bad, the neutral. I often say those who are neurotypical are generalists, good jack of all trades. Those who are neurodivergent are specialists. For organizations to thrive, we need a combination of specialists and generalists. Both are equally valued. Let's do the spiky profile. I want you to rank your skill sets here. Are you 5 out of 5 in maths, or are you not so creative? What we should find is, as a collective, all of you think differently, but as a collective, we typically balance each other out. This is why segregation, not good, but integration and all collectively coming together is good, because then we balance each other out. But we'll see if that is what the case is. At the moment, it's all quite spiky, but as more people answer, it tends to become more well-rounded. Of course, a lot of you say you're good at communication. Typically, it will be quite well-rounded. We're going to talk about facilitation now. I deliver webinars and workshops nearly every day of my life, okay? I've done workshops in schools, hospitals, prisons, young offenders institutions, you name it, I've delivered in there. Every type of learner I think I've experienced now. The young offenders institution was the worst. A kid stole my glasses, threw paint at me. That's, again, a story for another day. Online training is becoming more and more common. And I want you to just have a quick think about, how do we optimize online training neurodivergent individuals? You might always think, what are the challenges that people might have and how might we overcome them? To get the ideas flowing, being on camera might be distracting, or having a noisy environment, things like that. Okay, slide design, getting colors and contrast right. Yep, absolutely. If you make something super inclusive for someone with visual impairments, you actually make it really more difficult for someone with dyslexia because the contrast. Using subtitles in PowerPoint, yeah, absolutely. Sometimes they can be a bit inaccurate though. Oh God, I've got myself in hot water sometimes. I definitely didn't say what it said I said. Alt text, yeah, really important, particularly if you're using PowerPoint. Too much writing on screen, not enough time to process. Yeah, really big one. You'll notice in all my slides, I use as minimal words as I possibly can and rely on all the internal knowledge. Every time someone is reading, they're not listening. There's a myth that women are better multitaskers. Honestly, you're not. Neither are men. Multitasking is a complete lie. Our brain is incapable of multitasking. But what happens is our brain has a little lever and it goes switching focus. And those who are neurodivergent, the switcher is a little bit slower. So they might find it more difficult to swap tasks. Those who say they can multitask, all they're doing is processing the change really quickly. It's a fun fact to know. Keeping sessions shorter, a variety of exercises. Yep, lots of things we can do. What about some of these? How do you think we could optimize online training? On this, you just put number 1 if you think this is going to make the biggest difference. Number 6 if this will make the least difference. And while you're doing that, I'll just reel them off. Clear instructions. Keep it simple. Not because we're dumb, but because the clearer it is, the less kind of barriers we're putting up, the more we're able to get to the point that you're wanting to make. Visual aids, really helpful. Not all of us are the same type of learners. You might think that we all have learning styles, right? It's a thing that a lot of people talk about. You're either a visual learner, a kinesthetic learner. It's a myth. It doesn't exist. Our brains learn in all ways. But what isn't a myth is that our brains have preferences. There's a difference between a visual learner. That's essentially saying, I only learn this way. No, you have a visual preference. There's a difference. Interactivity, yep. That's because, again, with ADHD, remember, it's not about a lack of attention. It's too much attention. If you have the most interactive thing in the room going on, That is where the brain is going to be putting its focus. Accessible design, for instance, this background is slightly off white, which makes the contrast a little bit nicer on the eyes and easier to focus. If you have dyslexia and you struggle reading anyway, any additional barriers is going to make the likelihood that you follow through diminish. Support, regular feedback. A lot of people who are ND have low self-esteem. That's not inherently part of the condition. That is a societal thing. Give people feedback, let them know they're doing okay. Honestly, it goes a long way. All right, now we've moved on from that. We're going to focus on face-to-face now because that's what you spend most of your time doing. Some top tips. I always like this little image because people might say, oh, that's not hard. You can do it, like eye contact. It's not hard for you because you have what you're able to do. But here, this person, it's difficult for him because he has a different barrier to compare to others. It's always worth noting that easy and difficult is relevant to an individual. The amount of times I got told when I was younger, oh, no, it's so easy. I was like, that's not helpful. There are some things you can do to increase the likelihood that someone will benefit from your training. On here, I want you to rank how feasible something is. This is what we're calling a reasonable adjustment. Remember what I said about adjustments? You don't have to do them. You just have to find something alternative. The various formats might be having it in visual, might have it in auditory. I could see you might think, oh, that requires more work. Well, I could see that. For instance, I'm recording today's session. You could listen back to this on your headphones if you wanted. There's many ways, simple steps. Does it have to be convoluted or can you break it down? Multimedia, keeping it engaging. We know that people have different preferences in learning. I know for a fact you will not remember what I've said today. And I'm okay with that. But if you remember one thing, my job is done. But everyone's one thing that you remember is going to be different. And that's because they'll be like, maybe you'll find something a bit more engaging or you'll like one of my analogies and something will stick. Keep hands-on, nice, individual help. That's good that a lot of you said you can do that. Sometimes in large groups, that can be more challenging. Manage environment. This could be things like, can you set the lightings? Can you dim them? Can you set the temperature? Are you able to make sure that there's no echo? That would be difficult in some places, but maybe when you're organizing your sessions, you can say, do these rooms have these things available? If not, could we have an additional room where people can go if they are overwhelmed? What you try and do, you mitigate the things that you don't have control over and you change the things you do have control over, as long as they don't impact your overall content. An example, if I had the money, we'd have someone doing sign right now. I don't have that, unfortunately. You can put the automatic transcriptions on. Not perfect, but it's a reasonable alternative. And at least I am trying my best. That's the thing. You've got to do something. You can't do nothing. For some recommendations that you could do for accommodations, when I say multiple formats, anything that you verbally say, can it also be in writing afterwards? For instance, this is recorded. Maybe you can use AI to write it down. For me, I prefer listening and I don't read, but other people, they prefer reading things to really digest it. But just making sure that you complement it. Handouts, really useful. Help with memory retention. Extra time, that's because the brain processes take a little bit longer. Regular breaks. Think with ADHD, you've got so much juice in the tank. When it runs out, there's no more attention left to give. But even a 5-minute break, even a short break can be enough to reinvigorate the brain and start again. It's like starting a new chapter. Even if it's super short, breaks are really valuable. Quiet space. It doesn't have to stay quiet throughout, but as a base level, great. Assistive tech, I'll talk about more in a moment, but you may notice people are using different tech in order to navigate your sessions and understand what they actually do. Questions are really important. As I keep saying, no one wants to be the person who sticks out. If someone is struggling, they'll typically stay quiet. You'd rather people put their hands up and the question, even if it disrupts your flow, so they understand the content. Sessions where you have to stay quiet and only ask questions at the end are really bad for ND individuals because they typically don't ask anything. Remember how I told you my memory was really bad? If you say, hey, Nat, can you put a pin in it and ask me later? I've got no way to write my notes down. I'll forget it and I'll never ask that question again. That's a missed opportunity because I was willing to engage with the content. Breaks are really important because when it comes to memory, you've got working memory, which is like your RAM in a computer. Then you've got your short-term memory. This is like your documents stored on your desktop, which you probably shouldn't have that. You've got your long-term memory, which is like your SSD drive. Breaks allow time for that transfer. If you don't have a break, that information can quite honestly just get dumped. That's the thing. RAM will use the information when it needs, and when it's not longer needed, it dumps it and it moves on to the next task. And this is why I think encouraging questions, maybe say you might not need a break, but go off, have a chat with someone, speak to people, can make a really big difference. In terms of how you can adjust your delivery, be clear and concise, frequent check-ins, structured session, flexible pacing, multi-central learning. These are very generic. The reason they're generic is because a neurodiversity cocktail is different for everyone. Someone might have autism, ADHD, dyslexia characteristics. Another person might have dyslexia, Tourette's, dyspraxia. It will be different for everyone. It's more about being mindful and being able to adapt depending on people's needs. And you'll be able to visually see it. If you see someone is struggling socially, or someone looks like they're struggling to write or doesn't seem that keen on it, you'll be able to adapt. You don't need these labels in order to help someone, but knowing these labels can give you an idea of a typical profile that someone may have, and it'll give you that kind of initial starting ground. Now for visuals, we're on the last leg now. Visuals make a big difference. This is all about hurdles. I can absolutely navigate life without any adjustment, but should I have to? Do I learn less if I'm jumping over more hurdles? No. If I'm having to continuously navigate, it's holding things up. What we want to do is essentially create a level playing field, make things as streamlined as possible. So the things that are challenging are the content that we're learning, are the things that people are putting all their eggs into. People often say, put your eggs in multiple baskets. I think neurodivergent people put all their eggs in one basket. We're more like all or nothing. For visuals, I want you to select which font you think is best. And the font can make a big difference for those with dyslexia. I didn't have Comic Sans on here, which is a classic, but you've got a few to pick from. Okay, we've got PT Sans, Arial, all playing it safe. Is that the best font? No, but there are a few things that can make a font good. Some fonts, which typically tend to be good, are sans serifs. Nice and clean. Each letter is very unique to itself. They have a bit more spacing. If things are more together and don't have much space, when the brain is reading, it will trip up. People with dyslexia are actually really good at skimming it. The brain will try and get to the end destination as fast as it possibly can, which is really an advantage in a lot of instances. But when you are looking for precision, it can be challenging. Having nice space, keep it quite large. Large font isn't just for people who have visual impairments. It can also help those with dyslexia. For instance, this T is clearly a T. This Y is clearly a Y. But when I sometimes use joined up handwriting, those words merge together and my brain has to decode that. If I'm having to separate words that mold together, it's just adding to the time it takes to process. If you can, use active voice. It just means you are getting to what you want to say far quicker. It's more streamlined in the brain in terms of how it reads. Metaphors. I'm a sucker for metaphors, but those with autism take things quite literal. While as an adult with autism, I can absolutely work out a metaphor. Like, oh, it's raining cats and dogs. Of course I can work it out, but where your brain might see things as top down, looking at the bigger picture and getting to the detail, those with autism are bottom up processes. They'll start with the minor details and then go to the bigger picture. What we were doing is creating a bigger time gap between from when something is said to when it is understood. By the time their brain has worked it out, you very well could be way on your conversation and they haven't really spent that learning. I'm sure we've all had a time where someone has spoke, they said some kind of a colorful phrase, and you're thinking about that colorful phrase, and by the time you zone back into the room, you completely lost track on where they were even talking. Formatting, you'll notice that I often make my words bold. I think that can really help me know what's the important takeaway, particularly for skim reading. Descriptive actions, if you want someone to do something, make it super clear. There's probably some good expression that goes with this, but essentially, do not assume anything. Assumptions are the worst thing you can possibly do. Assumptions are based on your brain and are based on anyone else's. Oh, here's some color palettes. Which color do you prefer? There isn't a right or wrong answer to this, but you will notice that I've used all soft palette colors. Anything which is slightly off light, not too in your face, tends to be easier to read. If you have a visual impairment, you may struggle more with softer colors because the words don't stand out as much. You can see why you've always got this bit of a battle between, I can't make something super inclusive for everyone because that won't work. But are there adjustments? For instance, could I give an alternative version to someone who needs it? Or is there a color which is more of a all-round people pleaser. Don't try to be perfect. I think then you'll always set yourself up for failure. Mild colors to neurodivergent people tend to be better. Bright colors tend to be worse. Contrast, it should be avoided and can become very extreme. But this again is only focusing on neurodivergent individuals. This isn't talking about everyone. This is why I go off with a slightly off-white. It's not the perfect color for some people with dyslexia, but it's not alienating other people. It's making that fine compromise. Next one, GIFs. I don't know if any of you use GIFs. I love GIFs. However, there is a good GIF and a bad GIF. Which GIF here do you think is good or bad? They got SpongeBob in, so they're both good. But there is one that I would use for a presentation and one that I would. Yes, we've gone for that. The first one, it completely rotates. It never stops. It's got fluid motion and your brain can get used to it. The second one is too jarring. It's always changing. Even when I'm talking, my eyes are focusing on that. An even better GIF is sometimes we use GIFs to express a thought or an opinion. We all think differently. If you can have subtitles, that can be really useful. Another thing worth noting is, say you've got autism, a lot of people with autism also have a higher likelihood of having epilepsy. You don't want something which could cause an epileptic fit. A lot of people with autism also have ADHD, and those with ADHD will always go for the most engaging thing on screen. That will steal the attention. While you might know a little bit of information about someone, there's a lot more information you may not be aware of, but it's worth at least understanding that could be something that they may struggle with. This is a really good example on how you use icons to help illustrate a point. Icons are brilliant. You should also explain what they mean. Here, I want you to write down what you think these images mean. What is one word which sums up exactly what those images mean? If we all think the same, we would all put the exact same word. But depending on our background, our thoughts, what we've been exposed to, we will have different views. We've got pin, favorite, save, love, bookmark. The point of this slide is if we all thought the same, it would have been one answer for everyone. But it could be a bookmark, could be a favorite, could be a pin, could love it, could be a like. This is why we should never make assumptions. We love using emojis for things, but we've got to know that one thing doesn't have the same meaning for everyone. Also, have some sort of consistency. When you're using the save icon, everyone's familiar with the little floppy disk. The pig icon could also need save, but people are less familiar with it. So it's good to have that level of consistency. If you choose an icon to represent something, have that running throughout the presentation. You can check using Cognitive Accessibility Guides. It's a good website where it can give you more updates, and there's different settings to make sure, is it easy to read? Is the colors okay? Can it be read by screen checkers? Contrast checker is quite good to make sure that as many people as possible will be able to read the information. If you were worried about taking a complex subject and making it accessible for everywhere, a good website is called Hemingway. You can tell them the kind of the educational age level that you want your writing to be most suitable for. I find it's better to make things in a more simple language and allow the person to express what they learn in their own language. They're much more likely to learn it than to do it in the most kind of complex way. I could have spoke to you all today like neuroscience. Sure, it would be cool, but you probably wouldn't have remembered it because you'd be learning too many new things at once. I try to use as simple vocabulary as I possibly can because my job isn't to teach you vocabulary, it's to teach you neurodiversity. I'm doubling down on the thing I want you to learn rather than unnecessarily teaching you things which may not be that familiar. A quality act, these are the things you need to know. Know that everything we've spoken about today, you're doing it because it's the right thing. But more importantly, it is legal. You have to do it. I just want to talk about how we all learn best because it's something I'm curious with. Slide left if you like this, or slide right if you do not. For instance, are you someone who likes multi-sensory stimuli? Are you someone who likes very clear schedules, breaks? Oh, are you someone who likes being on camera or not being on camera when you are attending online sessions, for example? The key point of this is knowing that everyone is different. And it's about the flexibility and adaptability rather than having a blanket approach. I'm sure most of you would like it if I said, this is exactly what you need to do. By doing that, we've got the same problem as we had before, just a different end of the spectrum. Multi-sensual group work. Most of you like group work. Time limits. Some people like those visuals. Being on camera, more like than not. It's quite interesting because you'll see that people vary so dramatically. I don't try and please everyone. but I try to be as inclusive and as adaptable as I'm able to be, to the point that it doesn't negatively impact other people's learning. That's something that I always hold down quite dearly. If my adjustments start impacting other people, I'm just kicking the can down the road. Should you be on camera or should you not be on camera? Or do you think it should be optional? It's tricky, right? Because for some people, being on camera can be really anxiety inducing. It really is, because people are always looking at themselves. That's an additional thing to take their focus away. On the other hand, though, as a facilitator, I like you being on camera. When I deliver workshops and I can't see a single person, I really struggle because I've got no emotional signals to bounce off. My adjustment, which is for me as well as other people, is I always say, you don't have to be on camera. It'd be nice if you could go on camera because it helps me, but you don't have to. I explain to them why I want them to be. I give them an alternative way out. I do say, if you are going to ask a verbal question and speak to me, can you go on question for 2 minutes just to tell me your question? And then you can go back off the question. It's given that kind of balanced compromise. I really do need some faces. Otherwise, I have no idea where I am. Interactive platforms. Have any of you used any of these? Miro, Kahoot, Slido, Jamboards. I try to not do too many breakout rooms because they force people into an environment that they may not be comfortable with. But what I like about these interactive platforms, it allows you to verbally talk to me should you wish. If you don't want to verbally talk to me, you can use the chat. You can use little emojis. It gives people different options to express themselves. But no matter your communication standard, you are able to have an opinion. I think that's really important. It should never be that only the extroverts have their voices heard, because often the introverts have some really interesting and well thought out responses. They just don't get the time of the day to talk about it. If you want to learn more and you thought this is useful, Nat, how do I get more of this? We have a YouTube channel, not many subscribers, but check it out. I've done videos on absolutely everything, from understanding dyscalculia, looking at Tourette's in pop culture, lots of things. Autism, Asperger's, check it out. Neurodiversity in anime, you name it, I've done a talk on it. It's just exceptional individuals on YouTube, and you can learn as much as you can. If you want to get in contact, my name's Nat, that's N-A-T, so Nat, exceptionalindividuals.com. And I'm always more than happy to help you reach out, steer you in the right direction. You can go on our website for a bit more information. Honestly, I'm an open book. Thanks, everyone. Really appreciate it. Bye.